Look up Monster from the Ocean Floor in the sci-fi movie guides, and most of the bad things said about it are true. But don't make the mistake of calling it unimaginative, because when it comes to 1950s, 60s sci-fi, it's actually a movie of many firsts. The first where a woman is the brave central figure, predating The Fly, I Married a Monster from Outer Space, Corman's Not of This Earth, etc. The first to discuss overpopulation and the need for new food sources, pre-Tarantula and Beginning of the End. The first and only one to mention aqua farming, before The Underwater City. Even the first to feature a flesh-eating blob, before The Blob. And the title character, a giant one-eyed amoeba terrorizing a Mexican fishing village, is the first movie monster rendered huge by atomic radiation, before Them famously inspired a slew of such pictures. It was also the first movie ever produced by Roger Corman, made when he was still such an unknown that at least one 1953 trade paper listed him as Robert Corman. The profits that Corman reaped from the sale and release of Monster from the Ocean Floor may even have helped set the course for his future horror and sci-fi movie career. So if you're grateful for all the crab monsters, buckets of blood, and Pope pictures that followed, then tip your hat, or your scuba mask, to the movie that started it all. I recently did a telephone interview with Roger Corman about this movie, and we'll play that now. My first question for him was, where was he in his career in 1953, when he made Highway Dragnet and Monster from the Ocean Floor? Highway Dragnet with Richard Conte and Joan Bennett was a crime drama that I thought Roger produced because he gets an on-screen producer credit, but it turns out he didn't. I'll let him tell the story.
I didn't produce Highway Dragnet. I had written the script for Highway Dragnet, and it was called The House in the Sea when I wrote it, and I sold it to Allied Artists, sold the script, and went along as associate producer. And I took the money from the sale of Highway Dragnet, and so Monster from the Ocean Floor was actually my first producer credit.
Okay, how did you end up with a producer credit on Highway Dragnet then? Just sort of one of those bogus?
No. When I sold the script, I said I'd like to work for nothing if the producer would give me an associate producer credit, and I would work for nothing as his assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And he said fine. He had nothing to lose, and it gave me a little bit of an education in production.
Oh, absolutely. And please talk about how you came up with the idea for Monster from the Ocean Floor.
All right, I had made a little money from Highway Dragnet, and I was just looking around for ideas now to make a picture, because I had, as a result of Highway Dragnet, I had an associate producer and writer credit, so I was officially a producer and a writer.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I wanted to do something in a science fiction vein, and I saw a picture of this one-man submarine that had been developed by a company called Aerojet General, and I thought that was a good prop or vehicle for a picture, because I knew I would have very little money, and this really looked quite good. So I called them, said I was a producer and would like to come over and see it and talk to them. And I said to them, I'd like to use this in my picture after I saw it, and it'll give you a lot of publicity. And they said yes. And so I took the money I had from Highway Dragnet, raised a little more money, raised actually $12,000. And I got a lab deferment from Sid Solo at Consolidated, which gave me, he called me completely out of the blue, invited me to lunch, and said he would give me a lab deferment. And I figured with the $12,000 and the lab deferment, if I could defer a few more things, pay only part for music and part later on and so forth, I could make the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And I shot the picture in 6 days on the beach at Malibu, with a couple of days of underwater shooting at Catalina.
Okay, very good. When you saw the one-man sub at Aerojet General, did you see it like just in their factory, or did you actually get to see it in operation?
No, it was there. I didn't see it in operation, but they said they had tested it and it worked, and I took their word for it.
Did you ever, during the shooting of the movie, did you ever use it or
Oh,
anything?
yes, we definitely used it.
No, I mean, did you personally use it? Did you try it?
No, I didn't, because it required a little more technical expertise, and it was just a one-man sub.
Gotcha. And supposedly your outline was called It Stalked the Ocean Floor. Do you happen to remember if that's correct?
Yes, I called it It Stalked the Ocean Floor. I made a deal with Lippert Releasing, which was a small independent distribution company, and they paid me a fair amount of money, considerably more than the final cost of the picture, with deferments and everything, was about $30,000, and they paid me $60,000 plus a distribution percentage, and Bob Lippert thought It Stalked the Ocean Floor was too arty a title.
Yes.
He changed it from to Monster from the Ocean Floor. Actually, I still like It Stalked the Ocean Floor, but it wasn't important, and I said okay.
All right. In your autobiography, you tell a funny story about your parents being two of the people you went to for the money early on and what their reaction was. Would you mind retelling that?
Yes, they encouraged me, but my father said, "You're on your own." They had said to me when I graduated from college that they had paid for everything, including my college education and everything else, but now I was on my own. And I thought they said the same thing to my brother, and I thought that was perfectly fair. I understood, and now it was up to me. However, my father kept the books on Monster from the Ocean Floor.
Oh, great. Do you mind me...
At no cost.
At no cost. Do you mind me reading you, it's very brief, what Wyatt Ordung said in a Fangoria interview about the money raised for Monster from the Ocean Floor, and I'd love to have you react to this.
All right.
This is Wyatt Ordung. I raised the money. The whole picture cost $39,000. We did the initial shooting for $19,000 with Academy Award-winning cameraman Floyd Crosby. And incidentally, Corman was living at home with his parents at this time. I raised all the money. I hocked my life insurance policy. I hocked my home. And the Fangoria interviewer, Johnny Legend, asked, well, what did Corman do on the film? And Ordung answered, he drove the truck.
Well, that, of course, is totally untrue. But I don't want to get into any dispute with Barney, because it was the only picture he ever directed. He was an assistant director. What happened was this. I had the money from the sale of Highway Dragnet. I had a little more money that I'd raised from college classmates at Stanford. And Wyatt Ordung, his name was Barney. Barney came in and said he was an assistant director, and would I have a chance of hiring him as director? And I said, I'm $3,000 short on my budget. If you'll put up $3,000, you can direct. And so therefore, I got the final $3,000 of the 12 to make the picture, and I got a director for nothing. He had a percentage. I gave him a percentage of the profits, so he did fairly well.
Right. And here's from a 1979 interview with Floyd Crosby, which I don't think was ever published, conducted by a fellow named Mark Lamberti. He asked about Monster from the Ocean Floor, and the first thing out of Floyd Crosby's mouth was, it was the only picture I worked on that was made without any direction. Wyatt Ordung was his name.
I will have no comment on that.
All right. And your screen...
Other than you can use Floyd's comment, because it's pretty close to accurate.
Okay, terrific. And William Danch, I looked him up on the internet, and he looks like he wrote a lot of radio shows and cartoons for little kids and nothing else professionally that I can see. How did you end up with Mr. Danch as your screenwriter?
I had a little office above the Cock and Bull on Sunset Boulevard, and there were other offices in the building, and Larry Cruikshank was an agent, and I wrote the outline for Monster from the Ocean Floor, but not the script. And Bill Danch was one of his clients, and Bill had never done a screenplay before, and so he agreed to work for a small amount of money and a percentage of the profits also. And it was arranged through Larry Cruikshank, his agent.
Okay. And just for fun, if you don't mind, just to show the world how far you've come, would you describe your Cock and Bull restaurant office on Sunset Boulevard as it looked in 1953? What kind of place are we talking about?
It wasn't even an office. It was the reception room to another literary agent who was very small time and just worked by himself, but he had a reception room, sort of an entrance to get into his office, and I rented the reception room. So people came through my office in order to see him. It was probably the least impressive office of a producer that I'm aware of.
Funny. And how long did you have that arrangement? I mean, like years later when you were making pictures for AIP, were you still in the same office there?
I eventually, after the money I made on Monster from the Ocean Floor, there was a suite of offices there. They were all very inexpensive. So I then took a one-room office for myself there and made my first few films from that one-room office.
Gotcha. And who cast the movie? Do you have any memories of the casting process?
I cast it myself. There were a number of agents, sort of small independent agents, in this little in the floor above the Cock and Bull, and I talked to several of the agents there and cast it through them.
And I thought Stuart Wade. I looked him up, and he was a former singer. And whose idea was it for him to sing a song in the movie? I'm going to guess that it was him, since he
It was his.
Yeah,
that's right.
And did you have any objection to that, or you thought it would work?
I had no objection. I thought, why not?
All right. And what was, do you have any memory of your first sci-fi leading man? Do you have any memory of what he was like as an actor?
I thought he was good. I thought Ann Kimball, the leading lady, was actually carried the film. Stuart Wade was good. I thought Ann was extremely good, and she had a little bit of a career. She did a number of things after that, and we cut the film to feature Ann over the other people in the film simply because she was the best actor.
Oh, absolutely.
Although Stuart was good. He was fine. But Ann, for a little picture shot in 6 days, gave a fully professional and good performance.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. Stuart Wade, actually, to me, he looks a little like Robert Ryan. So he had a good look, and he was certainly pleasant in the part, but Monster from the Ocean Floor is like Not of This Earth, where the leading lady is the one who, picks up the ball and carries the ball, and the leading man is like, be careful, honey, throughout the whole movie. And the girl does all the monster fighting.
Right.
Floyd Crosby, can you say something nice about Floyd Crosby, how you met him and worked with him?
He was recommended to me. I don't remember exactly who recommended him. I think it was an assistant director who had worked with him and told me Floyd's story, which was very interesting. He had won the first Academy Award ever given for, I think the picture was called Taboo. It was a silent film by, I think, Flaherty, a semi-documentary shot in the South Pacific. He was semi-blacklisted. He wasn't really blacklisted, but his name had come up in some of those congressional hearings and so forth, and he wasn't getting the work that he should have had because there were certain studios that wouldn't hire him. Other studios would hire him. For instance, he did High Noon, the Gary Cooper, a classic Western, but he would have times where he wasn't working between his regular work, and he simply wanted to work, of course, and make some money. So I was aware of this, that I was able to get, for the small amount of money I had to pay, an extremely good cameraman because of his political situation.
Gotcha. If you don't mind me reading to you again while you give your voice a rest, in that 1979 unpublished interview, Floyd Crosby says, the assistant art director on High Noon put some money in Roger's first film, and he recommended me to Roger.
I think that's what it was.
Okay.
Yes, it wasn't an assistant director, it was the art director.
All right, Roger asked me what my salary was, and when I told him, he said, oh, I can't pay that. But then he said, I can pay you so much, and then when I sell the picture, I'll make up the difference. I said, okay, you got a deal. He always went on a picture for as little money as he could, but he never went back on a deal. He was completely honest.
Yes, Floyd, we did that, and the picture did make money, and that was one of the deferments that raised the cost from $12,000 to $30,000.
Gotcha. And he said he did 40 to 60 setups a day on pictures like Monster from the Ocean Floor, which sounds terrific to me.
Yes.
And if you don't mind me continuing to read to you just for a little bit, then the second film Roger did was a co-direction between John Ireland and Ed Sampson, a film editor. And obviously here he's talking about The Fast and the Furious.
Yes.
After those two, Corman decided that if he couldn't direct as well as those two guys, he'd better get out of the business. So his third picture was Five Guns West, which he directed. I have done at least 6 pictures with men doing their first direction jobs, and Roger Corman is one of the best directors I ever worked with doing their first picture. He knew how to do it right from the start. He observed so carefully and was so bright, he knew how to direct right from the start.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah. And obviously you worked with him time after time, right into the Poe pictures, etc.
Yes, right.
You were 27 years old in 1953 when you made Monster from the Ocean Floor. How many 27-year-olds were doing what you were doing in Hollywood at that time?
I would think very few.
I would too, absolutely. And getting back to Crosby, he'd been in the business for years, and once the movie started shooting and he found himself working with a first-time producer, you, and a first-time director, Ordung, did he step up to the plate or help in any ways above and beyond, or did he just stay behind his camera?
No, he stayed behind the camera, but Barney really, as he said, Floyd said, I wouldn't say this, Floyd said there was no director.
Yes.
Barney was not, I want to be pleasant to Barney, so I don't want to say anything. Let's just say this. Floyd helped Barney a great deal. He did more than be the cameraman. He really was helping Barney set up all the shots and the camera angles and so forth.
Great. And can you talk about what you did? I mean, according to Ordung, you just drove the truck, but obviously it sounded like you were a real workhorse on this picture. Would you mind just briefly telling what your job was, your jobs were morning and evenings on this movie?
Well, of course, I was doing, I was essentially, as a producer, I was the producer, and I was doing a lot of work helping the grips. I was sort of a second grip, a second prop man. I even played a little bit of a role. I was just working all day long, filling in, because we had a very small crew, and whenever anybody was needed to do something, I would do that. So at various times I was working helping to move the camera as an assistant cameraman, helping with the sound man, helping more specifically with the grips and the electricians and prop men. I help with wardrobe. In other words, I was just working all day long in everything. And the driving of the truck was this. We didn't have, there's a whole story behind that.
Mm-hmm.
What happened was this. We didn't have money for a Teamster. Everything was working out of one truck. So I rented a truck and drove the truck. And what I would do, I would drive the truck to the location before the crew arrived, and I would unload everything but the heaviest equipment off the truck before the crew got there, to save on overtime and give more time really to working on the picture. When the crew arrived, the grips, with me still working, helping them, would unload the heavy equipment on the truck. And then we would be working on all the different things during the day. And at the end of the day, the grips would load the heaviest equipment onto the truck, and everybody would go home, and I would stay and load everything else onto the truck and drive it home. And I didn't get much sleep because I had to be there before the crew and stay there after the crew.
Yes.
Right.
Did you ever manual labor-wise, did you ever work harder on any movie?
No, I think that was the hardest. I was working with the submarine too. I was steadying it in the water and pushing it around. And in other words, I was just doing every possible job because we had such a small crew where somebody needed help.
Wow. And was Ordung correct that you were still living at home with your parents when you made this movie?
Yes. With the profit from that, I was able to get an apartment.
Great.
I had been unemployed before that.
Mm-hmm. And Hollywood Reporter, I'm sure you remember back in the old days, and maybe they still do it, at the end of the week they ran a list of what movies were in production and where they were shooting, and they listed it as being a foreign film being made in Ensenada, Mexico. Do you have any idea of how they came up with that idea?
It might have been this. I had a union crew, but I was a little short of what I was supposed to be, and they called me and wanted some information, and I really didn't want to publicize this picture too much.
Mm-hmm.
The union would come out and see that I wasn't really working. As a matter of fact, talking about the truck driver, one union did come out. The Teamsters came out, one guy from the Teamsters, and he said, "Who's driving the truck?" And I said, "I am." And he said, "You're the producer?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "You're driving the truck?" I said, "Yes." And he laughed. He was a good guy. And he said, "All right, Roger, for this picture only, you are an honorary member of the Teamsters, and you can drive the truck, but on your next picture, you have to hire a Teamster." And I said, "Yes." You know, and people hear so much about how rough and tough and bad guys the Teamsters were. I always got along well with the Teamsters, particularly they remembered that I drove the truck on the first picture.
That is funny. And according to Hollywood Reporter also, the shooting title was The Sea Demon. Does that ring any bells at all?
I think I was really trying to... I didn't even want it to be in the list of picture shooting, frankly.
Gotcha.
So I was doing everything I could to sort of disguise it. I had a different title. I said I was shooting in Mexico, all of that stuff. I really didn't even want to be in there, but they somehow found out I was shooting and called. So I made up all this stuff so that what was in the reporter wasn't really accurate.
Gotcha. And then anytime we see people on the beach, etc., that's Malibu, and anytime we see people underwater, that's the waters off Catalina Island.
Exactly.
Terrific. And can you talk about, I'd love to hear about the shooting of those underwater Catalina scenes with, according to Ann Kimball, a guy named Al Hansen doing the photography underwater.
He did some underwater photography, and he lived in Catalina. And it was a time when, before lightweight scuba gear, he had a full diving system, and he had an underwater camera. And I made a deal with him, and we shot off Catalina. The only problem was the water wasn't as clear as it should have been. Even then, there was pollution in the water.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And when you talk about old-time diving gear, do you mean like those canvas suits and the big round metal helmets and all that kind of stuff?
Exactly. That's what he had.
Wow. Ann Kimball said the water was freezing. Do you recall that?
It was cold.
Yeah, it was shot in October.
Yeah.
And is it actually, I mean, I can see Ann Kimball's face through the scuba mask, so I know it's her underwater a lot of the time. Was it also Stuart Wade underwater?
Yes, I think we had them both there.
Wow. And you probably both of them had to go out and learn how to do this stuff before they could make your movie.
Right.
Wow. That's just, to me, that's so ambitious for a guy doing his first movie on no money to have extensive underwater scenes.
Well, I think it was only 2 or 3 days. I think it was 2 days of underwater scenes, and I'd heard that he had done, that Al had done underwater photography. As a matter of fact, I called him and asked to see some of it, and it seemed perfectly good. And it was more of sort of home movies or documentaries that he would be making himself. It wasn't really fully professional work. Whereas if I'd had to hire a professional underwater crew, it would be way beyond my budget.
Gotcha. So the 2 days spent underwater, you're counting those in the 6 days that the movie took?
No, I should say 6 days plus the 2 days underwater.
Gotcha. Okay. And on a movie like this, were there any such things as watching dailies or some of the other niceties of picture making, or no?
No, I don't think so, because we shot everything at Malibu. We had no place to go to see the dailies.
Mm-hmm.
We had an editor, and I would call him and ask him if there were any problems. He would be in the editing room and seeing the dailies, but we would be working, from the time the sun went up to the time the sun went down, and there was just no time to get to a projection room.
Gotcha. And your editor, according to the credits, would be Edward Sampson, who co-directed your next picture, The Fast and the Furious.
Right.
Okay. And Alfred Hansen gets instead of underwater photographer, he gets the on-screen credit of technical advisor. Do you have any memory of why he got that credit?
He wanted that credit. I said, "What credit do you want?" It made no difference to me.
Right.
And he wanted that credit.
No? Well, good for him. To me, the most striking scene in the whole movie is the scene where Ann Kimball's underwater, or the girl is underwater, I should say, and all of a sudden the shark starts swimming past her repeatedly, and she's stabbing at it with her knife. And my God, where'd you get the shark, and do you have any memory of doing that scene?
I remember it vaguely, and I'm not certain Anne did that herself.
Oh, she did not.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Right.
you wanted her to, but she kind of put her foot down, according to her.
Yeah, she was not a dumb girl.
No. Now, how do you get a shark to circle somebody for a movie, or would that be a better question for Al Hansen?
I think Al sort of threw out bait or so in the water to attract the shark. And but it was a small shark, and there are certain sharks that are not particularly man-eating.
Okay.
And by throwing out bait, the shark was intent really on getting fed, not bothering to go after humans.
Gotcha. And according to Kimball, the girl in that scene is Al Hansen's wife, who was also a deep-sea diver.
That could be.
And whose idea was it for Wyatt Ordung to play a prominent role in the movie on top of also directing?
It was his idea. We didn't have very much money, and he had done a little bit of work as an actor.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, I think he probably just thought it'd be nice. He wanted to act, and we could save some money on a role.
Did the weather cooperate?
Yes, we had no problems. To my memory, I don't think we had problems with weather. We had some heavy clouds a couple of days, and it was a little colder than we thought, but it wasn't anything unbearable.
Okay. And again from Ordung, I'll give you a voice arrest for 30 seconds, a man named Jack Milner saved that picture. If it wasn't for him, there'd be no Monster from the Ocean Floor. The sound somehow was recorded at different speeds than the picture. When we first saw it, Roger Corman, I thought he was going to die in the projection room. Jack Milner recut the sound word for word. He is the hero of that picture, one of the most beautiful men God ever created. Do you have any memory of that?
Yes, I don't remember exactly what it was. To me, it was simply some of the sound was out of sync, and Jack was a sound editor, and he was able to cut and put the portions of the dialogue that were out of sync, put it back into sync.
About the distribution, your brother Gene Corman once told me when I interviewed him years ago that Herbert Yates of Republic had an interest in distributing the movie, but then Robert Lippert stepped up to the plate. And what can you tell me about dealing with Lippert?
Lippert had been a former theater owner, and he had a small distribution company handling reissues of old, bigger films and new low-budget films. He produced a number of them himself. He was a very sharp guy, and I got along well with him.
And Gene told me a story of Lippert agreeing to pay out $110,000 for the movie, but then later at the very last minute when people were sitting down to sign contracts, he reduced the amount a bit with the excuse, well, I found out it didn't cost as much to make as you told me it did.
I think that's correct.
Has that always been one of the perils of the picture business, those kind of last-minute renegotiations?
They happen. They don't happen all the time, but they happen enough to make you get fairly upset about it.
Okay. And he changed the title from Monster from the Ocean Floor, and I've got the feeling the success of Creature from the Black Lagoon, a half-alike title, might have been in the back of his mind when he did that. And in your autobiography, you wrote that you saw it in a theater on Hollywood Boulevard and found it rather audacious and funny. So you thought it played well when you saw it with an audience?
Yes, I thought it played fine. It was obviously this was a low-budget film, but that type of low-budget science fiction film was fairly popular. That's essentially the reason I made the film. I knew that with science fiction you didn't need stars. The creature was the star, and it played well. It was nothing great, but the audience seemed to enjoy it, and it seemed to be fine.
On your own, for old time's sake, how often do you reach for the DVD shelf and watch one of your own movies with no prompting, no reason to watch it, just, I haven't seen that in years, let me watch one of my own movies? Does it ever happen?
Very seldom. Occasionally I will, but essentially I made the picture, I saw it when it came out, there's no reason to see it again. Every now and then I'll maybe take out one of the Poe films or something like that and look at it.
Oh, great. And in a 1964 interview, you said of Monster from the Ocean Floor, it cost me about $18,000 and grossed $300,000. That did it for me. I was in the business of directing scare pictures from then on. The field was wide open for newcomers. So was Monster from the Ocean Floor really that influential in your career? Do we have that movie to thank for all of the sci-fi and horror pictures that followed?
Not really. I may have been misquoted because my very next film was The Fast and the Furious, which was a road racing picture, and the picture after that was Five Guns West, which was a Western. But I did come back, because I think the picture after that was The Day the World Ended, which was a science fiction monster film again. So it wasn't, so I think I was misquoted because I don't believe I would have said that. What I probably said was, this was a genre I kept coming back to.
Gotcha. And in your autobiography, you said that you loved every minute of Monster from the Ocean Floor. And then you kind of gave the impression that loving the making of that movie so much was really what got you hooked on filmmaking. Is that going too far?
It's not going too far. It was fascinating, and I was working, as I said, I was doing 10 jobs every day. I was in the grip department, I was in the sound department, I was the teamster, I was helping with wardrobe, I was helping with the submarine. You know, I was working all day long, and it was fun.
Fabulous. You know, I've, over the years, I've interviewed you now and then about a whole bunch of individual movies, and this, by far, this is the movie you remember the most about. I get the feeling it is kind of near and dear to your heart.
Yes, indeed. It's my first production.
Now that you've heard Roger Corman's main memories about Monster from the Ocean Floor,